Welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. Today, we're going to have a conversation about innovation with the big I and innovation with the little I, and talk about the stories that we tell to kind of make both of those amazing opportunities happen inside of our organizations. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Brian Clausen. Now, Brian has been driving innovation through automation and process improvement at some of the biggest companies in the world, and is now at the front of a new wave of innovation, what we're going to be talking about today, citizen development. Using tools like Alteryx, he has opened up a whole new world of innovation to thousands, focusing on improving the working environment for individuals and leveraging those small scale wins to identify really large scale opportunities. Brian is the executive director of Markets, Operations, Digital Innovation, and Strategy at JP Morgan. He has a diverse business and technical background with over 20 years of experience in building ROI through innovation at best-in-class companies like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and CVS Caremark, a Medco Health Solutions company, and also creating these broad-based opportunities through his background across a variety of disciplines in the business intelligence realm. And so I'm just thrilled to dive into the deep end of the tech pond today with you, Brian. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, Susan. I'm a fan of the innovation storytellers, so it's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're excited to talk about innovation on many scales today. And I want to just start off with a brief background on yours. So tell us a little bit how you got to this place, because you've taken your career through lots of the biggest and best names in the IT space. I mean, these are the companies that are at the forefront of changing how we lead in IT and this endless fascination, right, with digital transformation that we'll be going through, hopefully for the rest of our lives, right? Where we will always be in this process of coming up with new ways of doing things. But how did you specifically come to this world?
It's been a journey, but it's been a consistent journey. That it started back with my love of technology in probably would have been in about seventh grade. I was in a class at school, and these are back in the days where computers weren't necessarily part of the classrooms, that we had a computer room that we had a chance to go to, and we had a project to build some sort of graphic, a picture using a procedural language called, I think what's called Turtle. One of those.
Oh, there's a new one. Haven't heard that one before.
Well, it was like, give instructions, pick up the pen, put the pen back down, move this direction, so many
It's like an etch a sketch on the computer.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with it. And the project was to create some picture. I created an animation with a covered wagon going across the screen with Home on the Range playing in the background with the music. And from there, it's really been about consistent growth in the space and learning new technologies and always looking for ways to incorporate it. And I had a realization about 2 years ago that I remembered a specific conversation that I had over 15, now over 20 years ago. I was working for MBNA America, which was later acquired by Bank of America. It was a credit card bank.
Sure.
And I was working in our collections department in the operations. And I had a project. I don't even remember the specifics of what the project was, but the memory just sticks with me that I could probably walk into that building and find the cubicles where myself and this other individual were sitting. We just finished a project, and it dates me a little bit, but we were doing some screen scraping off of some old terminal emulation screens to pull information out for some purpose. And I was sitting talking to this other person, Henry, and I remember that conversation saying that this is just great, being able to step in and help people use the technology that's available to us to solve these immediate problems whenever tech can't step in and solve it. That we have something that has to be done here and now, and identify what we have available to solve that problem, and just solve that problem for the team. That wouldn't be great if this is something that you could do your entire career, that you could build a profession out of. That was probably back in 2001 that I had that conversation.
Wow.
And about 2 years ago, something just clicked, and I remember that conversation. Right? This is the journey that I've been on for my entire career. And I'm at that point now, that I'm sitting in a position where I have a team around me, that we can identify who needs help, how we can use the tools that are available to us to go out and help them and solve those immediate problems, really making their lives better. And that was a great moment for me. Just I don't know if everyone has that opportunity to realize that you're doing what you've always wanted to do. So that was real exciting for me.
So, like, Brian, you're like setting like six different fires in my brain right now because, this show is about the stories that we tell in order to get our big ideas and small ideas, the big eye and the little eye of innovation, move closer to the finish line. And one of the things I always share with innovators when we're trying to create an innovation story, what is the conversation we have to influence those folks around us, is you used a very pivotal phrase in what you said. You said, wow, our goal, like, we're going to make people's lives better. And so that word is called goodwill. And a goodwill story lights up the brain. It does so many things in a boardroom, in a team room. When you decide to make this story about making someone's life better rather than the problem, the solution, but rather the quality of life for the human that you're telling it to, incredible things happen inside the brain. And greater caregiving related activity, the ability to reward, like, we get a reward center in our own brain that goes off when we tell a story of goodwill. My desire is to make your life better with the work that we are going to do together today. That is a shift that I wish every executive would put as front and center, like that would be their screensaver on their computer. Do we do those anymore? I still remember the Microsoft pipes going across my screensaver, back in the day.
Absolutely.
Thinking about, how am I making my customer, you determine who that is, how am I making my customer's life better today? That's the question. And when we answer that with each action, then we get people to follow us. Like, we become Pied Pipers when we can tell a story that has that at the center. And it's helpful, like just what you said, it's really helpful to ask that question about what if we could make somebody's life better, what would it look like? And when we can solve for that solution together, you're telling the greatest story on earth. So take us now to this place where you are. You're at JP Morgan, right? And you are working on innovation. Tell us a little bit about your role so that we can just like get into the headspace of what the 9 to 5, well, actually the 4:30 a.m. to approximately 4 p.m. that is your life. Because I learned that Brian is a morning person this morning as I'm chugging my coffee to catch up.
Yes, I definitely love working that morning shift, and with a global organization, it's great to show that flexibility and work with people whenever it's natural for them. And with me, I work better at that time, so it's a perfect blend for me. And that people are often amazed at my hours, but that's what I prefer, and I love having that opportunity to get in first thing in the morning and just chug out those ideas before many of the other people are around. But
You know,
as far as
a lot of authors call that the God hour. They people who are in creative fields who are writing find themselves awaking or getting up at that hour to feel like they are channeling a certain, that it's not necessarily just coming from them, that there's some other higher thing that helps guide them. I'm just curious, do you
oh,
ever have that experience?
oh, absolutely, that it's hard to shut off that behavior too.
Hmm.
That I frequently, no one else in my household is up at 4:30 in the morning, and I'm still waking up that early on Saturday and Sunday. And those weekend days are when I can work on my personal passion projects. And I frequently will find that I sit down and I start working on something that's of interest to me. And next thing I know, it's 8, 9 o'clock in the morning that I've been sitting there for hours, and everyone else is finally up and starting their day. But the time just will fly by because it does feel like you're channeling some other power at that point in time, that there's no distractions. You know, you're doing something that you love, you know that you're doing something just for yourself, and that's the best opportunity to really make a breakthrough or to create some significant progress.
Mm, fantastic. I think I need to take like the Brian Clausen challenge as a night owl. So I'm fascinated. So tell us
So,
about your, some of the innovation that you're working on right now, Brian. And I really want to get into this citizen development.
so with my role right now, that we're responsible for, I would call it, we don't use the term internally, but everyone's familiar with a COE, a Center of Excellence. So we have a group of people that are very familiar with a number of digital tools that we use with JP Ultrix, UiPath, Acceptor are probably the biggest, but there are a number of other tools that we use as well. And we have this group that's very familiar with how to use the tools. They're the experts. And what we do is we sit and we've created a platform to capture ideas. And we use this ideation platform. We reach out to everyone, and we want to hear from each and every ops teams, each and every person within the organization, that we understand you as an individual sitting out there, you know what your biggest challenges are. You know what the most mundane tasks are that you perform. You know what sucks the life out of you whenever you have to sit and transfer information from spreadsheet A to spreadsheet B
Ugh,
for
the
two
worst.
hours every Wednesday morning.
Is
So
AI going to save us, Brian, by the way? Is AI going to save us from those mundane tasks
eventually,
eventually?
but there's still a lot of data understanding, and there's a analytic maturity scale. And most companies and most industries really aren't that far along the analytic maturity scale. And in order to take advantage of AI and really, and I don't even know that the AI that we have is quite there yet. I've been keeping up with ChatGPT and very impressed with some of the things that it's doing, but there's obviously still some challenges there. So I think we'll see some new iterations over the next couple of years, and that's going to create those opportunities. But until your organization achieves a high level of analytic maturity, you're not really able to utilize those types of tools to solve these problems. And that's where the citizen development comes in, and that's where teams like mine come in, that we sit and we go through those ideas that come in. We identify where there are opportunities for scale. So if I have 8,000 people that are submitting ideas, person number 7 might have the same idea as person number 7,000, but one is sitting in Chicago, the other is sitting in Mumbai, and they don't talk to each other. They have a whole chain of command before you get to one central person. So they're not realizing that they have the same problems. So it's our job sitting centrally to identify, we're having multiple people that are identifying these same problems. Maybe this is something that we as the centralized team should take on and try to create a solution that's going to be able to solve these individual problems at scale and
Mm.
deliver one solution that's going to solve 3, 4, 5, 10 different people's problem at once. But then we also identify what are the ideas that come through that are pretty particular to the individual or the team that's submitting it. And that's where the citizen development comes in. That
Example of that though, Brian, so we can get our head around what we're talking about. What's the problem?
problem is at the end of the market closes, and I'm sitting in an operations team. Half an hour after the market closes, I get a report from system A And 45 minutes after the market closes, I get a report from system B. And somewhere in there, I get individual reports from the brokers or clients that I'm dealing with. And I have to identify, are there any discrepancies? Does a client think that they completed a trade with us, but maybe there was a problem in one of the systems and we weren't able to match that trade? So the trade is still sitting there unfulfilled. We need to make sure that that's being identified. So someone's sitting there and they're reconciling and looking at the different reports because our systems aren't all talking to each other. In an ideal world, everything would happen automatically and there'd be no need for human intervention. But whenever you're talking about complex financial systems, that we have hundreds of clients, hundreds of brokers, dozens of markets that we're interacting with, and we're just not at the point where everything can be ingested and everything can talk to each other effectively. Maybe that's that future with AI that we'll be able to get to that point, but it's a huge investment in order to normalize all those systems so that everything can reconcile and everything will be able to communicate effectively across the board. And that's why we have operations teams that are sitting there to handle those exceptions. In the markets world, I mean, we may be looking at 97 to 99% of trades that happen, no one ever touches. But
Amazing, right?
but the volumes in the market are so high that even if you're only talking about 1 to 3%, that's a huge amount of work. And there's an immense need for operations people to be sitting there making those judgment calls and looking at these spreadsheets and reports that are coming out to make sure that everyone is serviced effectively, and that if you're trying to complete a trade, that trade is what you are expecting and when you're expecting it.
Right.
So those are places where a system development type scheme can really be effective, because each individual person might have something very individualized and very bespoke that they're doing. And we're never going to get to the point where we're going to build out an IT system that's going to incorporate each and every exception. So we need these people to sit there. But that doesn't mean that what they're doing isn't repeatable. What they're doing isn't something that adds value to the organization. And that's where we're asking them to submit those ideas, to capture those ideas, and then we give them the tools that they need to automate or improve those processes so that they can either be done automatically through a scheduler, or maybe it's something that instead of sitting there and manually copying and pasting from one spreadsheet to the next and doing some VLOOKUPs in Excel, that you can create a workflow that will take your input A and your input B, and whenever you click this button, it's going to do all that work, and it's going to identify, based off of the rules that you've created, here are your exceptions, here are the things that you need to look at. Or maybe it even takes that and it fires it off on an email to your partner team that's in a follow the sun model, that whenever we finish up here at the end of the day, sending it over to the team in Hong Kong or Singapore that is just about to start the day, and they can follow up with that.
I've
So
never heard
now-
it called that before, the follow the sun model.
Oh yeah, yeah. That we use that term quite a bit in operations, that when we're dealing with markets across the globe, that there's almost always some point in time that something needs to be done across one of the markets, either before the market opens, while the market's trading, after the market closes. So it's really impossible or inefficient to do that in a single location. So you have the teams sitting in multiple locations across the globe, and as long as you are effectively able to hand off the information and those responsibilities, one team is going to be operating for 8 hours of time, and then once they get to the end of the day, they transfer the knowledge. Here's what's outstanding. The next team that's working a normal shift, not the 4:30 a.m., can pick it up and start working with it somewhere else. That as the sun goes around, so does the work.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk about this. We started off the conversation talking about the little I and the big I, like, and then I really want to get into the citizen side of development. So before we get into the citizen side, how do you frame big innovation and small innovation, and what's the difference between innovation and iteration in that scenario?
So innovation with a big I for me are the large scale projects, the products that really change how you do business, or they are driving the bottom line. And I think that there's been a lot of that that's been talked about in the Innovation Storytellers podcast series, that a lot of the people that you bring on are really changing the face of their company or changing the face of the world with some of the innovations that they're bringing to scale.
Folks at
And
like NASA and Tesla and Corning Glass, like big ass moonshot breakthrough kind of stuff, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And largely it's their job. And I've heard you mention it a number of times, that go back to Edison, that I mean, Edison had the idea for the light bulb, and he sat there and did 10,000 iterations trying to figure out how to make it work. That was what he was focusing on, and he had that problem in mind and was just working at that. That was his job. Whenever we talk about small I innovation, usually it's not the main focus of the person to create the innovation.
Hmm.
And I read something interesting the other day, that citizen development's always been with us, that some of the best inventions that we've seen over time come from people whose job wasn't to invent, whose job wasn't to run some accelerator. It was just they needed something to make their life better. And you could go back, you could call it the first invention or the first innovation of fire. I'm sure that there weren't cave people sitting around discussing that we need someone to research and do trial and error and identify how we can have a method of cooking our food and staying warm at night. That just didn't happen. It was someone that
Somebody had
had
a
that
problem
need.
in solving, right?
Yes. And so that's what small innovation is. It's understanding the world around you. It's understanding what you're doing, and it's bringing to bear the tools. And I think it's really interesting. I actually was doing a bit of research, and I looked up what the definition of citizen development was. And let me just read it here. Citizen development is an employee who creates an application, who creates application capabilities for consumption by themselves or others using tools that are not actively forbidden by IT. And I love that second
Love
part about
it. Love
not
it.
being actively forbidden by IT, because it really encapsulates that this isn't necessarily our primary job a lot of the time, that especially for the citizen developers. I see myself as more of a hybrid. I like wearing that citizen developer hat, but my job is to innovate. My job is to help these small I innovation citizen develop, understand the tools, and to use the tools that they have available so that they can create that difference in their day-to-day lives. And where this gets really interesting is whenever we're talking about small I versus big I innovation. Big I innovation, you have the splashy headline. You know what that product is. You know what the impact of that is. If you're working in a large organization, your C-level is going to understand, and they're going to know what those big moonshot projects are that the centralized teams are working on. When we're talking about small I innovation, that's where the storytelling really comes in and is important, because you don't have those big splashy headlines, that you have little bespoke solutions that are having a fractional impact. But it also goes back to what we talked about at the opening, that these are things that are impacting individual people's lives. So in order for that small I innovation to be successful in the citizen development world, you have to be able to aggregate them up, and you have to be able to talk about how it's making an impact over a larger organization. And last year, my group helped deliver over 1,000 solutions. I, I can't tell you that, oh, solution number, I'm not going up to the C-level and going to tell them solution number 502 was this person built a solution that did a reconciliation that saved them 20 minutes at the market close every day. You're never going to sit in a meeting with your C-suite and tell them that type of story. But the story that you can tell them is we delivered 1,000 solutions. Within this particular group, we had 40 different solutions that were implemented. We track how long people are working on average. We were able to see a 12% reduction in the hours that these people work as a direct result of these 40 solutions that were put in place. We didn't occupy our IT resources, which, let's face it, are very scarce. IT is never going to be able to fully support all the needs and all the desires of an operations team. That we have long lead times, and we may have years before we get a strategic solution from IT. These people were able to deliver 40 solutions in a matter of weeks or months that had an immediate impact and made their lives better. That instead of work 11, 12 hours, now they're down to a reasonable 10 or 11 hours. And they're able to go home and they're able to have dinner with their family, or they're able to have a social life outside of work.
Or to see
Because
their kid's soccer game, or, to actually take a whole week of vacation. Ooh, Americans, 5 whole days consecutively, right? But, what I would offer, to our listeners, and is in thinking about how you frame that story, is, we're shaving 12 hours off of one of our, off of our colleagues' plates every day, or, whatever that equation is. And just by inserting the phrase, if you're looking to tell that story of what you've been able to accomplish, the next phrase you want to insert after that, so that my people can now, so that our teams can now. And just by saying, all of us, right, if we're doing the right things and we're working in a B2B context, we are saving people time, saving them money, and making them more productive. That is the function of my attorney. So I don't have to go to law school, right? I can still pay him $600 an hour, but still, like, that, someone is saving me time, saving me money, making me more productive. And as you and I were talking prior to hitting record on this, the C-suite gets really tired of just hearing, yeah, we saved you a lot of money. Yeah, we saved a bunch of time.
well, I don't know they ever get tired of
They
you
don't get
telling them
tired
you're
of it.
saving them
Fair
money.
enough, fair enough. But it is a common mantra that virtually every direct report into the C-suite is going to be bringing them back. But the second half of that discussion is, so that if you want to tell a great story when you're reporting the results of the great work that you do, little I or big I, use that phrase, so that my team can now, so that people can, so that the customer can, and now describe all the goodwill you've created, the amazing transformation you've created for them. So what does the before and after, the Oprah Winfrey makeover picture look like of what life was like before? Toil, drudgery, dread. And now on the other side, how life has gotten better, even incrementally, for the team, so that they can now do more things. And just, if it's helpful to our listeners, a laundry list of the so that we can grow our team, so that we can collapse our team. We need fewer folks to get this done. We can be even more efficient. We can work on more markets. We can work on more areas. We can develop our product roadmap. We can accelerate our development. There are so many things that are the domino effect, what we call the right side of the slope of a story. Here's the inputs we put in. Here are the amazing outputs that came out from a tech perspective, but that have human outcomes. And also a reminder, great stories have a character. So so that, our colleague Rajesh in India is now doing X, so that our C-suite leaders can now do Y, so that our trading floor team, like Bob and Sally and Sue, can now do the following.
And one of the so that's that we see a lot of is that we're eliminating these mundane tasks from
Mm,
people's schedules so that they can use the skills that we hired them for, and they can use their brain and they can engage and they can come up with new ways of operating the business. They can come up with new things that the small scale innovation drives the big scale innovation, because now
yes.
people have the bandwidth, and it, it it creates bandwidth for our IT partners as well. That instead of having a backlog of 200 items that we have to spend weeks going through and descoping, we can take, okay, those 200 items, we'll take the bottom 100 off your plate automatically, and we'll look at those from a citizen development standpoint and find places where we can have individuals solve these problems for themselves. And now you, the IT team, you can go work on those big I innovation projects with a little less distraction and a little less pressure.
Wow. And who doesn't want that? Yeah, I think it's just absolutely fantastic. How important is it to convey the progress that you're making on these little I and big I, like the small wins that we started to talk about? And what's the context where you're sharing these stories about the small wins and the so that?
It's incredibly important that JP Morgan is a huge organization, and I'm not making any claims that we're a monolith and that we all operate the same way. So I'm describing what I see within, I work within the investment bank, specifically within our market operations. And I interact a lot with other groups across the organization. I'm a member of our advisory committee for one of the tools, Alteryx, and so I see, particularly with that, how it's implemented and how it's used in other organizations. And when other organizations don't have this concept of creating these wins, of aggregating and creating the stories to share with the executives, they're not getting the support that they need. They're not getting the excitement that they need. That citizen development is all about momentum. And
All
you,
about
you
momentum. Yeah. Okay.
yes, you need something to get that ball rolling.
Yeah.
And that's another reason for having this centralized team or bringing in some experts. You get the ball rolling, you create those first wins, and then you make people realize, hey, I can do that too. That this isn't out of reach. That's the thing about citizen development. It's within reach for probably 50 to 75% of any of your organizations. That you have people in these seats because they're smart and they're capable. And the tools that we have available to us today in this low code, no code revolution are designed for those people that are already in your company. You don't have to go out and find a software developer that's gone through and been trained in computer science. You don't have to find these people that have been working with programming languages for years and years, because they just aren't there anymore. That if you look at the US Department of Labor statistics, the growth in the software development space is far out or the need in the software development space is far outpacing the production from a university level and a training level. That we're just not creating enough people to fill these roles. So where do we have people available? Where do we have tools available? We already have people available in our company. We already have people in those seats. Now, if we give them the right tools, that they're not going to replace the citizen developers. I mean, excuse me, they're not going to replace our IT organizations and our software developers, but they can take that pressure off and they can solve those immediate problems now. So that's where we see the groups that don't understand that concept of momentum. They don't understand that concept of celebrating the wins and getting those stories out to not only up the chain to the C-suite, but those stories have to go down the chain as well.
Mm.
That if we want people to buy into citizen development and we want people to invest their effort to learn this new skill set, they have to be able to see that, one, it's going to impact their lives, that they're going to create career opportunities for themselves. They're going to create, you know, better work-life balance because they're going to be able to do more, and they're going to be able to create some financial opportunities for themselves because now they have this desirable skill set. So you need to be able to tell that story and get people involved, create that momentum, and get the program rolling. Once it's rolling, it can be hard to stop. That I don't know why you'd want to, but you reach that point that it's self-sustaining, and that now you taught people how to tell the stories. And as a centralized group, I don't even have to tell the story that much anymore because other groups are identifying and they want to roll together and they want to tell the story about how this department was impacted and what solutions that they've rolled out because they've seen me tell that story, they've seen my team tell that story for other groups, and now they want to be that lead telling the story about how they're changing the business and how they're impacting how the people are working from a day-to-day perspective.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating. And one of the things we talk about in innovation storytelling, which is a little bit different than your block and tackle regular storytelling, is that innovation messaging needs momentum. And I find it fascinating that, the techniques that you're using in terms of development itself is pushing a certain momentum. Like we can feel the small wins, we can feel the small gains, and therefore it's fueling this movement to really push something faster, further. And in the world of storytelling, movement takes place when you have a story that goes viral, that you have a certain momentum. But the way that it does that is number one, harnessing the emotion, a so that I really care about, that I'm invested in. And the other is language, is language that's easy to share. And sometimes it's alliteration, sometimes it's metaphors, something that allows us to create a memory making device so that when we hear a great story, we remember it and we're able to literally take it with us. It becomes embodied, it lives with us in our brain or in a feeling. And so when you think about the momentum that you've gathered with some of the innovations that you're working on, how do you empower people to kind of keep that momentum
I
going?
mean, the empowerment really, it's not a problem
Mm,
once that ball is rolling, because the teams that have already invested in and have already started down the path of having citizen developers and deploying solutions, they're already creating their own bandwidth to continue with that process. So the problem is really at the initiation. You have a new team that's just completely underwater. They have more work that they can complete. The team is working extra hours, and the whole concept of how could you possibly ask me to spend some of my time to automate this process?
mhm.
I can see that yes, over the long run, it's going to be useful, but I can't give you the 20 minutes that we're sitting here talking about this. I can't afford that, yet alone a couple of hours to work on development, or even if my centralized team does the development, they can't spare the time to do the testing and make sure that the solution meets their needs. So that can be a real challenge. And that's where you have to have a good relationship with their management. You have to have a good reputation. And oftentimes it's just a matter of convincing people that it is going to be a short-term pain, that they're going to have to double down in order to get through and get that first solution out live. And then once they have that first solution, then they're going to start seeing the results come in. But it absolutely is very difficult at that initiation, that no one no one feels that they have the time to change the world around them. But until you make that time, you're just going to continue falling further and further behind.
Mhm. Fascinating.
And I've been really lucky that I've had a lot of support from the management at JP Morgan, particularly within the the markets and the equities groups, that they're big believers in what we're trying to do. So sometimes there's an opportunity that they can shift things around, that if the team really needs the help, they can bring in a couple extra bodies from somewhere else to help do some of the day-to-day tasks and free up some of the subject matter experts that can then work on some of these innovation projects and to move that needle and to create that momentum. So having that relationship and having people that understand what you're trying to do is very important.
Yeah. So can you tell us what's the next big or small cool thing that you're working on at the moment?
I like doing my individual projects, and I I'm a as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, I'm heavily invested in Alteryx as a platform, and I've developed a connector that allows people to use Alteryx to connect to and pull data out of Jira, which, if you're not familiar with Jira, it's very commonly used as a project management software within the tech world, as well as in operations, that we're big users of that at JP Morgan. I created that for my specific team and for a specific application. That's exploded and it's now being used by hundreds of groups across JP Morgan.
Wow.
And that really taught me a lot. And that was something that I kind of worked on as a passion project. That was one of my Saturday, Sunday type projects.
Your 4
That,
a.m. God moments, is that it? So you had
yes,
help from above on creating this project, is that what I'm understanding?
yeah. But I have another thing that I'm working on that is really focused on, I call it, I say that it's a tool to help supercharge citizen development, that it really is thinking about how we use this space. And one of the challenges that we see in large enterprise organizations is a citizen developer usually does not understand software best practices. So even with the best low code, no code tools, they're still not going to be creating the same level of robust, flexible software that a software development professional will create. So what I've created within the Alteryx space is a tool that can actually go in, and most of these low code, no code tools like Alteryx are configuration based. So you're creating a visual workflow that you have step one, step two, step three, step four, etc. Some branching and all that capability. But each step has a configuration that's specifying what's happening during that step. And most citizen developers, when they get started, they may not understand how things will change over time. And so they create a very specific, I call it fragile solution that's not able to be flexible and adapt over time. So the product that I'm working on right now is a configuration manager that can go in, take that solution that's developed by a citizen developer and automatically pull out all of those hard-coded configurations, put them into an external source that can be easily managed, and then reference that external source in the end product. So I can now take that modified workflow, put it into a production environment, and in 6 months, when the name of the file that's being used, the format of that file changes, I can make that change in an external configuration in a database, and I can make that change in a matter of minutes versus needing to do a change control from my prod system, pull that code back down, make the change, go back through the governance, go back through the testing cycles. In JPM world, that's probably 2 to 4 weeks to make that change if something as simple as the name of a file changed. So with this new process I'm building out, it externalizes all of that and enables that citizen developer now to create code that's really going to be flexible and as sustainable as something that might have been created by a professional software developer.
Oh, this has just been a fascinating conversation because like thinking about these projects and how we actually communicate them to other people inside of the organization. And, frankly, I think we fall short oftentimes in extolling the virtues of what our team has accomplished. And I feel like these little eyes that you're introducing us to allow us, some cause celebrate, that we have a reason to celebrate the incremental wins along the way and the so that's, right? That we can actually relish in what the output has been so that we can take credit for some of it, but also we can just watch people's lives getting better around us from the work that we do, which is, I think, why we got in it to begin with, right? Even if we just say, yeah, I love solving a great problem, like, so that people's lives get better.
Yeah, and that's always been important to me and will continue to be important to me, that I I get accused of being either a philosopher or being too sappy. That I'm a firm believer in any little incremental improvement that we can do. If we can help the people around us, that I I love seeing that impact that you can have. And I think that it all does come back around. You may not be able to trace it, but I want my life to be better. I want my children's life to be better. So how do I do that? I do that by making your life a little better and your life a little better. And hopefully just that all comes around, and that it's the concept of, what is it? Rising water brings up all ships,
A
or some
rising tide
stable like
lifts
that.
all boats. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm always here with a metaphor when you need it. So, all right. So I'm going to ask you my 3 quick hot seat questions. Brian, what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
I'm going to set aside the philosophic hat for a second, and be a little bit more off the cuff. I think the air fryer is the greatest
Yes.
innovation.
Thank
That
you. Who wants a soggy French fry? There is nothing worse on the planet. I appreciate you,
and,
Brian. That's
and
support.
there's no better way to make tater tots. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah, yeah,
The air
yeah.
fryer is the way to go.
Undisputed. So, if you could join an innovation team, any innovation team throughout history, which one would you join?
Okay, I got rid of the sappy philosophic hat on the first one, but I might go there on this one. That I think that as many people do, the greatest challenge right now is really the climate. And I love the idea of citizen development. And I think too many of us are sitting here waiting for that big I innovation that's going to solve the climate crisis. That where someone's going to perfect the nuclear fission, or we're going to create an floating algae farm that'll suck up decades worth of greenhouse gases and feed billions of people. That we're hoping and we're betting on these big I innovation projects that are going to solve the problem. But I think that this is a great place where the idea of citizen development really comes into play. That it's not about what someone else can do to solve this problem for all of us, but what can we do as citizen developers of planet Earth
Mm,
do to make an impact at that individual level? Where can I reduce my carbon footprint? Where can I help support sustainable companies? Where can I make that impact as an individual?
yeah.
So I'd love to, I mean, it's not an innovation team, but I'd love to be able to bring that concept and get more people on board with that idea, that it's not some big I innovation that we're waiting for, but these small I innovations are something that can really make a difference in the climate crisis that we're all facing.
Fantastic. And my last question is, what innovation would you love to see in the world that isn't invented yet?
I'll, I'll go back to our conversation and say that the artificial intelligence, that I think we're working down that path. And I'm a bit of an optimist, so I'm not going to be saying that the AI is going to take over the world and eliminate all humankind. But I think that there's an opportunity that we can use computers more effectively in order to, again, make our lives better and solve some of these problems that we have.
Fantastic. Well, from your lips to the robot's ears, I'm sure they're working on it as we speak. Brian Clausen from JP Morgan, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. where can people get in touch with you if they want to connect on all things Big Eye, Little Eye?
LinkedIn is the best. I'm not very active in social media as a whole, but LinkedIn, it's Brian Clausen Driving Innovation is the URL. So
Fantastic.
check me out on LinkedIn, reach out if you have questions. If you're a startup looking to get into JP Morgan, please don't reach out. I get enough of those already.
Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Oh, that was